looters of the nation's treasury will be jailed. That's the promise President Muhammadu Buhari made on his arrival from his 10-day vacation from the United Kingdom a few days ago.
Yeah, that's correct. His anti-corruption fight has yielded good fruits over the years amid criticisms that it is selective. But this administration is not backing down anytime soon. Let's now bring in Inibehe Effiong, a constitutional lawyer. He is here in the studios with us, and also Desmond Ojo, a politician. He is also an architect and a businessman. Thank you very much indeed for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you. Nice to see you, gentlemen.
All right, let me start with you, Inibehe. PDP, through its publicity secretary, Logbodeo, and the OBJ group are saying to the president that, look, you need to begin with APC members to demonstrate integrity on your part. Is there a sense in which that resonates with you?
The president is not in a position to jail anybody for looting the resources of the country. My construction or interpretation of what the president said is that the administration is forging ahead with the fight against corruption, and that within the purview of his constitutional powers as the chief executive of the federation and the head of the executive, under which agencies saddled with the responsibility of fighting corruption like EFCC and ICPC function, is that he will ensure that the fight against corruption is fought. I believe the president is aware that only a court can make a pronouncement of guilt. That is the preliminary point. When PDP says the president should start with members of the APC to demonstrate that he's genuinely fighting corruption, I am very careful to respond to that. The president need not start with members of the ruling party. What the advocacy should be centered on is that the fight should not be partisan. Because if you now say the president should focus on members of the APC, you are invariably saying the president should fight members of the APC.
No, they are saying...
Let us have it both ways.
They are saying, look, there are members within the party who also have alleged criminal records. That, look, you also need to begin to fight them as well.
I agree.
Because it does appear that it is selective. That's the general, conception.
No, that opinion is not personal to the PDP. Other Nigerians and other interest groups have also raised concerns on the neutrality of the fight against corruption. Namely, that there are even persons in the current government who are facing grave allegations pertaining to corruption, pertaining to criminal infraction. But it does appear that those persons are one way or the other being protected by the current government. We Nigerians are conversant with the case of the sacked SGF, the grass cutter in quotes, who despite being indicted by a panel headed by the Vice President of Nigeria, is yet to be arraigned in court. There are also allegations involving the Chief of Staff to the President, who is alleged, I use that word alleged carefully, to have been involved in 500 million naira bribery with MTN. There are other allegations involving other members of the government, including allegations of forgery, which is as serious as that. So some Nigerians are genuinely agitated that how come that a government that is fighting corruption has not done anything about these cases. This is important because in the fight against corruption, perception is everything. Once there is that perception that the fight is partisan, that the fight is determined by who is involved, it affects the credibility of the war itself.
Right.
So without lending my voice necessarily to the advocacy of the PDP, being a party that is also immersed in corruption, being a party that was rejected in 2015 because of corruption, being a party that does not have the moral right to lecture Nigerians on corruption, I speak independently to say that indeed there is need for the fight to be spread across board.
All right. Let me bring it to Desmond now. In 2015, when the president was coming in, fighting corruption was one of the three cardinal points or promises he made, besides the issue of the economy and security. Now, 3 years down the line, Nigerians, from the way Inibehe was saying earlier on, not so many Nigerians see the fight against corruption as very conclusive, as very frontal, as very broad, as the case may be. But when the president got back from vacation, he, reiterated his fight against corruption. How does that sit with you? Is it saying the obvious, or does that rekindle the hope of the fight against corruption with you, or you feel he's just saying, or is something political?
Yeah, my opinion is that when the president came in the last time, he was quoted out of context. Okay. The president was saying his mind, but not as a judge or a lawyer. As the president of the country, he has a responsibility to direct all the agencies to do what is right, because he holds us the mandate to do that. And in the last 3 years, the president has done well. This government has done well in fighting corruption. If you can recollect, recently, back in July, the UK government is opening up a list of foreign people who has properties in their country, and the president has done a lot in the sense of recovering the Abacha loot as well. Also, the president has done well by empowering EFCC and ICPC to do their functions. But one feature that we need to remind the government is that there's need for speedy prosecution. What do I mean by that? There was this clamoring for a special court for looters. If you have that, then it will be speedy, because back in the line before 2015, between 1999 and 2015, there's been some corruption cases that are still pending in court. I'm not a lawyer, but my learned colleague can talk about that. You go from High Court to Appeal Court to Supreme Court. All those delay the court processes. I believe if the government can have a special court for prosecution of these looters, that will help in speedy delivery of judgment. And again, in the last 3 years as well, you can hear the case of some former governors who were being prosecuted, and the judgment was delivered. So the president, and we've not had this in the last, I must tell you, in the last 18 years of democracy. So I think this government has done a lot in fighting corruption. But a lot of people, they misconceive the president. When the president talks, he talks from his mind. And all he needs to do is to give directive to the necessary agencies like the EFCC, like the ICPC to perform their functions. And another thing is to enlighten our people, our political office holders, to make sure that they do what is right at all times. If you're vying for a position, then you should do your asset declaration. If you know you want to serve your people, it's only right for you to fill the necessary forms. So this is what I have, this is what I have. It's not a crime to own properties out of this country. If you are genuine, it's not a crime to have bank accounts. But I think most of these institutions need to tighten up their know your customer stuff in the bank. The foreign countries as well, they need to tighten up their corruption fight against people coming to buy properties and investing money in their country. In my view, this government has done well between 2015 and now fighting corruption.
Well, the point there is, like Inibehe said earlier, perception is key when you're talking about fighting corruption.
Yes.
And if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases within this same government have been named and there hasn't been decisive or proactive a move by the president to handle them the way they're supposed to be handled, Nigerians will see it otherwise, no matter whatever the government says.
I think our lawmakers, they have a lot to do as well in sponsoring bills that will assist the government in doing this. What do I mean by that? Like I said earlier, if we have a dedicated court to file these cases, then we can conclude corruption cases in 6 months. Yeah. As to doing corruption cases for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Sometimes this might be delayed tactics on the part of the accusers and the accused. So if we have special courts handling these cases, then it will be a plus to the government. I think our lawmakers, they have a lot to do in this regard.
All right, Inibehe, well, I don't know if you do agree with him that the government has done well in terms of fighting corruption. He made reference, apparently one of the cases he made reference to would be Joshua Darius, sentenced to 14 years in jail. Then there was Julie Yame as well, who was also sentenced. But are you convinced that the government has done very well in that respect? The other question is, there is a sense in which, the president, felt that the judiciary was becoming a clog in the wheel of, the fight against corruption, and that resulted in the raiding of the homes of some of the judges at some point and all of that. What do you see? Do you agree with him?
I don't know what the response should be, except to say that the government has demonstrated what looks like a fight against corruption. There is no doubt about that. You cannot take it away from this government. In relative terms, one can conveniently say the Buhari regime has done better than that of his predecessors. However, the cases he cited involving former governors, the point should be made and clarified that those cases were initiated before this government came into existence. Indeed, some of those cases had been in court for about 10 years, except that judgments were given during the lifespan of this administration. However, prosecution of those cases had commenced long before this government came into existence. So in giving credit to this government, that point needs to be noted. I want to say further that the issue of the judiciary cannot be underrated. The fight against corruption does not involve only the executive. It involves the three organs of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The president cannot, on his own, establish special courts to tackle corruption. I'm aware there has been discussion on a special crimes courts bill. This is a legislative problem, which requires the input of the National Assembly. The question is, how far has the executive gone in presenting this bill to the National Assembly? And what is the extent of lobbying? By lobbying, I don't mean giving Ghana must go. How far has the government done? What steps has the government taken to pressurize the National Assembly to pass this bill into law? And you also have other outstanding bills, like I think that one has even been passed, the Mutual Legal Assistance Bill, which enables the government to retrieve assets from foreign nations and all that. So I agree that all the organs of government have a role to play. Delay in cases, we can't attribute that solely to the courts, the judges. Indeed, by the enactment of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015, we no longer have what we call stay of proceedings, interlocutory appeals in criminal cases in Nigeria. We had a situation where a person is arraigned in court is not even allowed to plead to the charge. He will raise an objection to the competence of the court. He will raise an objection to the jurisdiction of the court, to the competence of the charge. The judge will have to rule on the application. It will go to the Court of Appeal. It will be fought all the way to the Supreme Court. You no longer have that. In the case of Olisametu and Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Supreme Court has said that the new law is valid. We no longer have stay of proceedings. What that has done is a radical departure from the past, in that we now have cases being accelerated. Again, you also have the directive by the heads of courts that now give special attention to corruption cases through practice direction. You are aware of that currently the Federal High Court is on vacation, but you have Ojuso Kalu still standing trial before Justice Idris of the Federal High Court in Lagos, because the court had to give him a fiat, the head of court had to give him a fiat to continue with that case. So this is the kind of effort the judiciary on its own is making to prioritize hearing and determination of cases relating to corruption. I want to say clearly that the president has a lot
within a good time frame.
Exactly. The president has a lot to do. Why some of us are concerned is that if you want to fight corruption, perception is everything. Not only must the president be seen to be fighting corruption, the president must clearly demonstrate that he's fighting corruption within and without. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. If people are said to have forged documents, the president should be of concern. Even before the allegation is determined, they should be in the interim suspended. You cannot have a situation
Step aside, let investigations
you cannot have a situation where someone is accused of forging NYC certificate, nothing is being done, the president is even elevating the person, the president is traveling with the person. A former governor of my state is accused of corruption. EFCC publicly came out to say they are still investigating Senator Godswill Akpabio. But Godswill Akpabio went to meet with Buhari in London. We cannot have this. This is about perception. Nigerians are seeing this thing to say that the president is not sincere. I agree that a lot has been done, a lot has been achieved. You have EFCC recovering about 739 billion naira within 2 years of Marco leadership. That is commendable. You have assets being recovered. You have cases being prosecuted. We are saying that
and 21 billion naira recovered through the whistleblowing policy
as well.
to
the credit of this government.
Yes.
You also have the treasury single account. You have the implementation of the BVN. These are executive interventions that have accelerated and enhanced the fight against corruption. The credit has to be given to the government. But we are saying that in giving that credit, we have to pay attention to details, that a lot has to be done. There are areas that the government has not covered, which Nigerians are concerned about. We cannot wish that aside. If people are serving in Buhari's government and they are accused of corruption, the first thing is to suspend them. Let the allegations be investigated. You cannot allow people who are being seriously accused of corruption. Look at even the former DG of this who was removed. We read in the media that he's being investigated. What have been? I'm not hearing anything about it again. When is he going to be arraigned in court if there are charges against him? These are the issues. These are areas that Nigerians want to see the president act on.
Yes.
But the president doesn't seem to be really concerned about when his people in government are affected. That is why you have PDP crying foul and all that. But Nigerians are genuinely concerned that a lot has to be done.
Okay. All right, Desmond, EFCC and ICPC are the bodies empowered to investigate issues of corruption and possibly move towards prosecuting those who are public officials who are involved in corruption. Recently, we had the issue of the cry out from Benue State and Akwa Ibom State of EFCC freezing the accounts, or the official accounts of those states. Now, in some cases, some lawyers said the EFCC doesn't even have the right to do that. If in the eyes of the law, we have a lawyer here who will certainly clarify that. But we're seeing it from the perspective of the fact that EFCC seem to be proactive from one hand, if you see it from that window. Yeah. Then on the other hand, others will see it as being high-handed. How do we reconcile that difference? In order to put things straight.
A hunt dog.
Yeah, exactly. Witch hunting. That, in fact, Benue State governor said that that's witch hunting.
I think EFCC and ICPC, the first call will be that they have their functions are similar. So the first suggestion will be that they should be merged. I was happy when the president came in and he was like, we have so many parastatals and government agencies and there will be mergers and all of that, And in the case of Benue, I think from a layman's point of view that when cases are being investigated or when states are being investigated, the first thing is to freeze the account, conduct your investigations.
Freeze the account of a state
or individuals. Conduct your investigations within a limited time before you file your papers in court. And I think what EFCC done, because the timing was not right, so the states and the governor felt it was being molested because of that. And going forward, I think EFCC, like the learned lawyer said, EFCC should not be partial in investigating cases and states as well. The APC states, PDP states should be on the same level of investigation. If you notice that something is wrong with this state, if there's a fraud or if there are cases against this governor, you shouldn't be partisan about it. But in delivering these cases as well, I think the government, like he said, the president has a lot to do. He has a lot of caution to do. When it's right to talk, you talk to these agencies, do what is right, don't be partial about it. And everybody will know that the president is not partial. The government is not partial about investigating cases. But in the case of Benue, I think the account has been released after a few days of investigation, and I know that maybe after some time some people will be charged to court and all of that. But it's not peculiar to Benue. There are other PDP and APC states that are under investigation as well.
Akwa Ibom State is suing EFCC for about 50 billion as the case.
Yes, absolutely.
But I would like, sorry, Ike, I would like Inibehe to help us clarify this. if EFCC has the right to freeze the account of a state government. Because the Attorney General of Akwa Ibom State has said that EFCC has no right whatsoever.
Yes.
Even if you are investigating, let us even assume that the governor is involved in a crime, or sorry, in corruption, whatever it is, the EFCC cannot freeze the account of a state government.
But
Carry out your investigation and then keep your evidence until when immunity is uncovered, when he's no longer governor, and then you can go up with the on prosecuting him. Can you help us clarify that in the eyes of the law?
My straight answer is that EFCC cannot freeze the account of a state. A state is not a person. A state is a component of the federation. Because by virtue of section 2, subsection 2 of the Constitution, Nigeria is a federation consisting of states and the Federal Capital Territory. EFCC cannot prosecute a state. You cannot have a charge bearing parties as Federal Republic of Nigeria versus Akwa Ibom State. Who will be prosecuted? Who will be jailed? A state cannot be prosecuted. A state cannot be indicted. But officials of a state government can, in my opinion, be investigated. Accounts of a state government can be investigated because you cannot insulate accounts from officials of the government of that state. Look at the governors who were prosecuted. The charges against them relates to management of the finances of the state. So when people make the argument that the account of a state cannot be investigated, it is very strange to me. If the FCC does not prosecute a state account, which indeed is a government account, which account would they investigate? Is it private account? It is the management of that account that is investigated. But you cannot tamper with the running of the account. What you can do is to gather evidence, what we call doctrine of tracing in the law of equity. Follow the money, trace the money into where these monies are being diverted to gather the evidence for purpose of prosecution, but you cannot freeze the account of a state because the state is not a person in the eye of the law. Again, I want to make the point regarding my state Akwa Ibom. The Attorney General may be right in law that the freezing of the account is wrong, but it's being very hypocritical because this is a state that has done everything to frustrate the FCC from investigating corruption. This is a state that has filed 2 court cases to frustrate any attempt by EFCC to investigate personnel of the state, past and present. They filed the first case before Justice Ntong in Ikot in Akwa Ibom. Got an injunction restraining EFCC, restraining ICPC, restraining the Inspector General of Police, restraining all commercial banks in Nigeria from surrendering documents to EFCC, from inviting personnel of the state government, both past and present, even from the creation of the state in 1987, that nobody can be investigated. So they are being very hypocritical. When that judge was challenged by some of us, he discharged the order. You know what they did? They went to the Federal High Court, filed a similar suit before Justice Riemann of the Federal High Court in New York, seeking the same relief to say, no, we cannot be investigated. When the Supreme Court has said in the case of Attorney General of Ondo State and Attorney General of the Federation, and for some several other cases, that the laws establishing the anti-corruption agencies are validly made. There are also precedents, of course, that TFCC can investigate any personnel of government. But this state, Akwa Ibom, you have a situation where the officials are invited by EFCC for questioning, they refuse to go. You have a situation where the Accountant General of Akwa Ibom State has declined to release documents to EFCC. You have a situation where the governor of the state has frustrated every attempt to EFCC to prosecute them.
All right.
So when they are now coming out to cry, Nigerians should not listen to them. But I agree that on the issue of law, that EFCC went too far. But to say that what the EFCC has done should be completely condemned, I will not be part of that because as an insider, I know the effort of Akwa Ibom in particular to frustrate the anti-corruption efforts of the government.
Okay. All right. These are strong issues that we certainly have to create time to look into as we get along. Inibehe Young, a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, and human rights activist, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And Desmond Ojo, architect and businessman, thank you very much for coming as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.